We're going to talk about Module 3 uh, today. For Module 3, we're going to be looking at this from the perspective of this will be included in our awareness and our operations level program. This is a short one. So why do we need to understand medical considerations? The victim and rescuers will be affected by conditions during water rescue operations that include hypothermia, cold water shock, hyperthermia, dehydration, stings, and drownings. We need to have a knowledge of these conditions and be prepared to respond. As we are going to effect a rescue and we're looking at the rescue sequence, self, reach, throw, row, go, we have to have an understanding that, if they've been in cold water for greater than 10 minutes, then they may be incapacitated, no longer meaningful movement of their muscles. We're not going to be able to reach or throw or have them self-rescue. So that's going to change our ability to follow the rescue sequence. So that has a big part on us. Also, as we're responding to these calls and we're looking at our peers, we need to have an understanding of these medical considerations so that we can look at our partner and say, hey man, you're shivering. Maybe it's time to switch out and get somebody else in here. So it's super important because we're no longer going to be effective. We got to follow BSI precautions. Wear gloves. Wear nitriles under your gloves. Additionally, there might be some insulating properties that are nice, but switch them out in between victims, especially if we're going out. If somebody hits water, there's certainly going to be blood. Additionally, we're going to break in windows. We got to follow BSI precautions. Bag valve or pocket mask. Be prepared to respond as you get out there. You go out, you do a go to effect a rescue, and you find the person is, needs some additional interventions. You should have, a certain amount of preparation ready. You may come back from a call and, go over to the hospital for titers to make sure you're up to date on everything, getting your hepatitis A and B. It's super important as this water comes up, these water treatment plants, they can dump all of that material right past the plant, right back into the water. So we're going to be floating in gross stuff. We should wear dry suits. Now, obviously, if we're talking about recreational level response, big, surface water type of response, a wetsuit may be appropriate for that clean water. However, that flood response, we should be wearing dry suits. Decon your personnel equipment after every run, not at the completion, between each victim, between each location. You're going to take up from one location, go to another, you should be deconning. One of the big things that we saw from the mass response during the hurricanes that hit Texas and California 2 years ago is that, these FEMA teams would come in and the camera would pan back because it's no longer interesting, and you'd see them pull off to the side, and an engine would be there to decon the personnel and the boat. And that's what we should be doing. Taking water samples at every location you go to, and this is something that I'm going to cook into our training materials, into our skill sheets to make sure that we're doing it, part of our checklist for equipment that we need. And then before, we demob at the end of the day, have we done X? Because, even I forgot it the other day, and it's something we need to be mindful of. If you're doing 10 runs, every run you go to, bottle it, write the time, throw it in the truck. When you get back to the station, put it in the fridge. Because if we get sick, the doctors are going to be able to use that. When we're going, 2 EMS, one for them, one for us. We should have a certain amount of medical treatment capabilities. And if you don't know what treatment capabilities you should have, go to your team typing lists. We have this data available to us. So as we're going through and we want to know, if we're looking at the team typing list, if I want to be, a type 3 team, we can look and say, hey, for type 3, one team member should also be an EMT. So this is, having a good understanding of this, operational capabilities per team. I need to have an AED, that type 3 team. So if you don't know, these things were not designed in a vacuum. They looked at the response and they determined that this is what we should have. So go and use that as a resource. Encourage your leadership to look at that. And document the treatment, provide the EMS. I don't do refusals. I'm going to have EMS handle it. So bring them out even for a walkout, have EMS get a refusal. It doesn't make sense for us to introduce that into the system. We talked a little bit about it earlier, but what is cold water shock? That immediate torsal reflex that happens, our diaphragm is tense, we have no muscle control, involuntary gasp. If you're not covering your mouth, you may inhale water and drown. And that could be the same for the victim. So if they're stuck on the mantle and you try to have them reach and they slip in, they've already stabilized. But if they were standing on top and they broke through, you're going to see that involuntary gasp. They could be claustrophobic, panic, confused. They're not going to be able to hold their breath during that first minute until they get their breathing under control. If they don't have a PFD on, they're probably going to go right under. After that, 1 minute of getting, 2 to 3 minutes max, getting their breath under control, they only have 10 minutes of meaningful movement before those muscles are no longer going to be able to work correctly. So we're going to call that the 1-10-1. 1 minute of that, cold water shock, involuntary gasping, getting your breathing under control, 10 minutes of meaningful movement, and then 1 hour until you become unconscious and die from hypothermia. So if you're not wearing a PFD after 10 minutes, you're going under. Hypothermia, how are we losing heat? Conduction. The water sitting against our skin, still water, not moving, is pulling heat away from our skin. Convection. If the water is moving, it's sapping heat even quicker. It's pulling the heat away from us. And that's why we're going to get into that help and huddle. We're going to talk a little bit about it and to minimize that surface area. Radiation, we're radiating heat from our body out of our head. Evaporation from respiration, is also losing heat. So all of these methods are combining to pull us down. Water conducts heat away from the body 25 times faster than air at the same temperature. So hypothermia, the body's core temperature is lowered below 95 degrees. You're going to see, if we look at a core temperature check for what these people, when they fall in, their temperature is going to go up and then it'll fall down. So it's super, important to have an understanding of that. When we talk about chronic versus acute, when the person loses heat in their house and they sit there for 2 weeks in the cold and then they die, what is that? Chronic or acute? Yeah, that prolonged exposure versus the sudden immersion, the acute hypothermia. Stages: mild cold skin, shivering, movement impaired, moderate confusion, poor coordination, slurred speech, and severe that muscular rigidity, slow pulse, respiration, dilated pupils, coma, and death. Super important to have ALS, for hypothermia. Our body is constricting our vessels so that it does not, it traps the heat in our core. The minute we start warming them, if we're bending them, we're manipulating them, moving them too much, we could be introducing that stale blood from those extremities into our heart. Look at it just like a crush syndrome type of response. We need ALS there to deal with that. Are people better acclimated to cold? Yes. You can become acclimated to cold. You can be more fit. Are you, well at a good nutritional state where you are, you've eaten enough and you have enough calories to continue shivering for a period of time? Those are all factors that go into it. Big thing, handle them gently. Cover head to reduce heat loss. Remove that wet clothing, right? Get them into another warming blanket. Hold them, get them warm if you don't have the blankets. Rewarm them slowly. ABCs the entire time. Circulation for a full minute. Remember, we're not dead until we're warm and dead. AED protocols for hypothermic patients, right? So we're engaging our ALS. What can I do if I'm responding? I'm going to be out in the cold. I'll tell you, when I'm instructing an ice class, I will be in the water for hours, just playing victim, rotating around. And how do I do that? I'm eating high energy foods. I am putting a beanie underneath my helmet. I'm staying hydrated, and I have appropriate layering in my PPE. under for my PPE. So a nice base layer that's going to wick water away, a thick polyester fleece to trap air as another insulating layer, and then my dry suit. So I don't need a Ice Commander, suit necessarily. They're great, for keeping us dry and warm. However, my dry suit can satisfy that if I layer appropriately. How do we survive if we go in? We're thrown from our boat. We're going for a long trip. Keep your clothes on. That PFD is going to minimize that surface area for water to travel across our skin, producing the convective action of sapping that heat. We're going to get out of the water as soon as possible. If we can't, we're waiting for the big boat to come get us all on our way to the ocean. We're going to use our help and huddle positions. All right, so we've got our heat escape lessening posture right here. We're taking our knees into our chest. All right, as much as we can, we're wrapping our arms around and we're keeping our head up out of the water, and we're basically minimizing that surface area to travel across. And then if we can get with our peers, we're going to get into the huddle. Our legs are going to be together, our arms around each other. If somebody starts shivering, put them in the middle. All right, so as soon as they stop shivering, that person gets out, the next one goes in. Okay. What is drowning? Suffocation in liquid. And we're actually, we're going to lose these. We're going to lose this slide. Sorry, taking a note real quick. Starting in 2017, slide 17, module 3. There's no such thing anymore as we look at this dry, wet secondary. This secondary drowning. Basically, we're looking at that and saying any near drowning is going to be considered a drowning, and they need to see ALS. Age, physical condition, length of time. Cold, clear water, you are going to be better off. Right? We know that. Golden hour, even an hour underwater. We know the longest has been 4 hours with no neurological deficit. Heat exhaustion and hyperthermia care. All right? Stop the activity. Cool them. Get them out of the suit into the cool water if necessary, if it's our peers. Cool, moist towels if we have heat exhaustion, hyperthermia. Cool and tepid water if transportation is delayed. Provide fluids, oxygen, treat for shock. Big thing, ALS. Let our ALS providers handle this. Provide fluids often to members. Dehydration is big. Look at the rhabdo. Not enough electrolytes. Big thing, just water constantly. And then some of those electrolyte adjuncts as needed, the Gatorades and stuff like that. It can cause altered mental status, headaches, fatigue, impaired judgment, nausea, and vomiting. Right. So if they're not, if they suddenly are complaining about headaches, we are dehydrated. As they go take a pee, if it's not clear, we need to be watering more. That's important for us to remember for our peers. Head and spinal injuries, if you were interested in getting a surface water certification, you need to have a good understanding of head and spinal injuries and how to pull those people out of the water. You can learn that from the, a lifeguard course. And then we do have programs for surface water available to teach that. But that is a specific skill set that you should have an understanding of. But again, we're not just talking about, that recreational, that person who dived and hit their head on a rock. We are out in it. If we are conducting searches, there is poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac. There's a cottonmouth who routinely hangs out at Scudder's Falls. Ticks are huge. I was just doing a search the other day for a missing person, and I pulled 5 deer ticks off of myself. And then as many, big ticks, or more. It was just gross, and a ton of poison ivy. So having the ability to respond to that, and just having an understanding that it's out there, it's going to be a danger to us. Those environmental aspects include that. I keep Technu in my deployment bag. At Technu, I can use that as a dry wash. It's basically mineral spirits, and it's going to remove that poison that urushiol oil from my skin so that I don't get poison ivy. If I'm if I go and get a ton of poison ivy on day one on a multi-day deployment, I'm not going to be able to make the grab later, right? So I got to stay in tip-top form. So we need to be mindful of this. Sunburn, huge. Sprays, lotions. If you're wearing dry suit, look at your wrists, look at your chin, your face, and the back of your neck. It's going to be clutch for us, guys. Apply it often. Even on that ice, that reflective, I will get sunburn on my chin. So be prepared. And it's not just us. It could be for them too. They've been out in an area for a long period of time. That's just going to be something that we need to work around and have an understanding that they may be, covered in bugs, covered in sunburn, and have ALS ready for those considerations. For transport, obviously when we're looking at those branches, right, hopefully we have a medical branch and they are prepared to go and intervene and talk to those people and handle refusals. If possible, don't do it. So if you don't have a model in your department for documented refusals, and you let your transport company handle that, continue that, especially on these. That includes walks out without assistance. Walks out with assistance. So, if those people walk out, that's one thing, we didn't intervene. I put my hands on them to help them walk out. I'm getting a refusal. And, I've been on calls where we have transported people. We bring them right out. They go on an ambulance. I've brought them to a location, where we maybe like a staging area, and then they're in a high water vehicle. And we've also brought people out where we've had to load them on boats, get them to another area. But there's another team set up for tech rescue for low angle, and additionally we could have helicopters. So all matters that we need to be mindful of. And we looked at that in Module 1, being prepared for potentially having those helicopter flyouts, having safety glasses and having hearing protection, because who's to say that we don't introduce an air operations officer into our command structure and that person says, hey, you know what, I'm going to have a helicopter come do a hoist, right? And you're going to be standing by with that patient for a hoist. You need to be ready for it. What is their condition? What is water conditions? I've had people get hurt and they were in the position of being in a class. They were wearing a PFD. They were wearing a dry suit. But the nature of their injury, they couldn't get into their dry suit again. They were uncomfortable with their PFD options. They didn't want to move their arm. So in that case, we're putting them in a boat with a type 1 PFD, not a type 3 or type 5. So their water rescue one came off and they got a type 1 nearshore PFD. It went over their neck and was affixed around their body and didn't require them to move their arms as much to get into it. And that's how they came out. So these are all factors, that might, hey, am I loading them into a boat? Do I have a boat available? Do I have to walk up a trail or, that's, 20, 30, 45 degrees versus maybe just bringing a moving control point and bringing them across in the water? What's the terrain like? What is those evacuation options? Do I have additional personnel? If you're the ones who got them out of the water, engage those additional personnel for a walkout. Just be mindful though, bring them out of the hot zone into the warm zone before that transfer. Otherwise, those people need to have PFDs on to go near water's edge. Do I have enough equipment to do that? And how far is it to medical care? The other thing is when I'm building these systems, and I'm working with my EMS branch to understand which side of the river are they going to when I'm done, right? I build this crazy system, I bring them over, and they go, hey, the city's split in half, the hospital's on the other side, we got to take them over. So engage early and have a plan. For packaging, PPE for me, protection from the elements, right? All those things, Stokes, Stresher, O2. And again, PFD and helmet before we move them into the water. Right, we never take a person from a position of safety without a PFD and a helmet. How do we prevent heat exhaustion by hypothermia? Yeah, we get that. All right, that concludes Module 3.